Complicity is more important than intersectionality, and how good vibes only neoliberal feminist psychology killed free love. I want to start by just talking about how there's nothing inherently revolutionary about intersectional politics. Capitalism is very open to everyone being themselves, everyone living who they want to be. You can be this intersection of different identities, and you are free to manifest this kind of postmodern subjectivity. This is not antithetical to capitalism. In fact, it's integral to the logic of a post-colonial capitalist era. It's impossible not to be intersectional in our world. And those people who, are going against intersectionality in some way are, in fact, racists. But that's not really what the issue here. The issue is not that racists don't like intersectionality. The problem is that intersectionality is integral to the logic of neoliberal colonials. And this has specific effects on how our personal lives and communities develop. For example,
as a polyamorous person,
I had always believed that it was always possible to have amicable endings in relationships, at least after a while, after a breakup. I believed in maintaining relationships with exes long after a relationship had ended, and I even hoped that by producing such a culture or believing in culture and helping to cultivate it, we can help to create a better human community. Since I was personally invested in this lifestyle, I had gone through a gradual change within my personal worldview, which was a direct result of a certain compelled and socially constructed for your own good culture shift that slowly eroded within the course of my lifetime. Usually the people I disagreed with were people who I already assumed would disagree with this kind of lifestyle. But with the recent realization of a long time developing idea, I have come to see that this culture exists also within those I once perceived as being allies in social justice warriors, who are indeed fighting for social justice, which includes this cultural change. I was quite active in my activist days as well. I hear today in the euphemisms of popular psychology an ideology different to what I professed and lived by, an ideology that I have been forced to address because it came into direct conflict with my life and my relationships and my politics. This ideology that love can be spread too thin. It is a resource, and in action, we should, as an implication towards productivity, not as a mere suggestion, be cutting off what are unessential relationships from our lives. This, in their rhetoric, comes out as cutting off toxic people from our lives. Yet, it also involves an essentialization of some people as being irrevocably toxic. This good vibes only mentality that somehow emulates this throwaway utility culture also helps contributes to this norm. This norm, reproduced by those with privilege in society, those with the privilege to use people, to throw them away, those with the privilege who continually throw people away, started to make this a norm, not just by themselves, but those who were continually thrown away, the victims, started to normalize and think that this was normal as well, and that they themselves had to change, and they themselves had to become strong and independent in and of themselves, instead of doing what we used to do as a culture, which was shame people who use other people. Now, we not only not shame people who use others, we idolize them and back their motivations with popular psychology. This culture shift, created by a mostly only feminine perspective, which ironically claims the mantle of intersectionality, has been orienting our culture to such a degree that it has become okay to clinicalize a type of masculinity that refuses to have this culture invade their lives. This clinicalization of masculinity has carceral, professionally therapeutic, and pharmaceutical side effects, while simultaneously killing any kind of culture and ideology that does not subscribe to neoliberal subjectivity, including this kind of free love mentality that liberal culture also helped to create. In layman's term, traumatized feminists that refuse to have a truly intersectional analysis while claiming the mantle of intersectionality killed free love and gave power to privileged men by commodifying emotional labor. Then they call this very system that they helped to create, they call it heteronormative capitalist patriarchy, when clearly it is a type of capitalism that they were totally complicit in creating. This crisis the left is experiencing can be laid at the hands of a neoliberal subjectivity normalized from the American Psychological Association to the Central Intelligence Agency and can be epitomized by the phrase, "It is too much emotional labor to educate you." This is not a matter of a certain type of rogue feminism or a bunch of bad corporate apples in feminism. This ideology is at the root. Feminisms sought at their root a very noble cause to make the personal political through a gradual destruction of culture brought on by continual deals with corporate privilege. Feminism's unwavering sex work is real work doesn't just correctly defend the right of sex workers or workers. It is a mentality that normalizes prostitution in every aspect of our lives and instead has turned the personal not into a space of the political, but instead into a space of a pure ideological capital. Engels manifested in his pontifications, what is a family if not a matrix-like form of long-term prostitution and baby-making just to maintain the power of corporate state patriarchy? I personally cannot think of any other manifestations of what a family could mean. I guess I should just have this pure capitalist cost-benefit analysis in this regard invade the most personal recesses of my mind. This is when feminists, for example, say that they shouldn't be the therapists of their partners, when in fact love was this deep traumatic bonding that is involved with love. Love itself is trauma. Love itself is trauma of a great extent. Deep personal spaces, that these very deep connections that we can have with people, to know them by their deep trauma, has become instead a cost-benefit analysis, a realm of the political, a realm of pure images. Oh, how will I look to the other? Will the other perceive me in a certain way if they know this full story about my trauma? This is this new ideology where human beings, they can't connect on that deep level because it's seen as too much emotional labor. And that is also an emotional labor cost-benefit analysis, this realm of deep connection. So I should just have this cost-benefit analysis in the deepest recesses of my mind, in the deepest connections that I can make with other people, this neoliberal subjectivity. I should be doing this because my church does it, the political sphere does it, and even the psychological institutions that reinforce them through content and context and medium, they themselves do profess and they do cultivate. These rituals of social reproduction continually rehash this popular ideology and karmic cost-benefit mantra into every realm of life. New Age witch feminists also unwittingly contribute to this promotion of this spirituality, karmic spirituality, Buddhist spirituality, neo-Buddhist spirituality. Nay, this theology, nay, this ontotheology of neoliberalism. That's what it really is. This is why we have a weird situation where conservatives, who are supposed to be the defenders of capitalism, become a workers' party. How did that happen? This is because they do have in their pre-Ayn Randian greed is good ideology a southern hospitality that refuses to let the market logic invade the ideology of the church, the family, and perhaps even the political space. People confuse this with fascism, since fascists also sought disgusting outcomes that were more important than pure capitalism or even winning the war against the Allies. But this seedling religiosity, which decides between ideological profit or ideological profit, which decides between what Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts of America are versus the Nazi youth, which, and you might have your own criticisms of the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, but Girl Guides, I guess I don't know what they're called, has the potential. So that ideological seed, which you can choose between, manicheally put this good and evil, has the potential to create revolutionary ideals itself. This ideological ontotheological decision that you make. The reason why I call it the commodification of emotional labor is because without feminists as a whole admitting to their complicity in their everyday lives to helping create a system which privileges a small group of men, there can be no progress. Anthropologists of the last century were the last unwitting colonizers, going into people's cultures to, quote, study them, quote, in their naive academic scientific mind. Their studies could not have led to the worst evils, helping to penetrate Victorianism into vast territories for their own good. Today, feminist institutions for their own good, from psychological organizations like the American Psychological Association to feminist organizations that wage unimaginable wars, from the feminist, talking about the feminist CEOs of all these Lockheed Martin, all these, and the CIA intersectionality that we're seeing recently, to even academic discourse itself, which shuts off all critique, all self-critique, all publishing critique, dialogue as misogyny, leading to a situation where different feminist groups point fingers at each other, calling each other misogynists, while claiming that it is too much emotional labor to teach each other, others who also claim the mantle of feminism, about their trauma. So one group's trauma always is supposed to outweigh another group's trauma. One group is always supposed to shut up in response to the trauma of another group, rather than having an actual dialogue and talking about humanity's trauma and talking about the collective emotional labor as a larger collective, not as an individual processing. Today, feminists, under the auspices of the United Nations, go into the most remote regions of the world, nobly trying to instill a Western culture of individualism, bodily autonomy, etc. Yet these noble causes, this road that is being paved, is not the road to hell. It is the road that lets the imperial armies, the production mentality, and the neoliberal minds invade the farthest corners of the globe. These are the Karens of neoliberal colonialism that I fear will never admit to their own complicity. Complicity. What is it? Race theorists have been delving deep into their own history of complicity, which has led to some heartbreaking discoveries and true introspection that feminism is too traumatized to handle. In a future video, I will delve further into the concept of complicity. But just as a sample, imagine finding out that you are the that your great grandfather was not just idle, but part and parcel to the history of oppression in your family. This is what I mean by complicity. To bring up and talk about that which is unmentionable in your family. To bring up and talk about that which is unmentionable in our human family. Complicity is integral to the process of seeing how one group's collective trauma does not outweigh the trauma of another collective. And it is integral to breaking up the neoliberal culture of commodified emotional labor that polarizes echo chambers, kills family, community, free expression, and free love, that turns every aspect of our lives into a neoliberal, Black Mirror-esque, socio-economic cost-benefit analysis. Even the deep recesses of our minds, even the deep free expression that we can have with our lovers, even the deep authenticity of these relationships come under question because of this neoliberal feminist colonialism.